and ask Christ or ask Peter, your teacher is not going to pay the taxes, the temple taxes. Then Peter asked him, Christ, they are asking for the taxes. So he told him, just go, throw your rod and you will catch a fish, open it and you'll find a piece of coin, pay for you and for me. This is the situation that happened right before this question by the disciples. So the disciples were not moved by the fact that Christ took James, Andrew, or James, Andrew, and John to the mountain and transfigured in front of them. That didn't move them, that didn't make them think who's the greatest. Many other occasions where he took the three and he went with them and prayed, it didn't move them. But when it came to money, why Christ paid for Peter and not us? You know, is Peter better than us? Right? That's really what they were asking. Is Simon Peter better than us in any way? That's why you're paying taxes for him. And it's interesting because they didn't ask him that. They felt this question would not be appropriate. So they modified the question a little bit and they asked, who is the greatest in heaven, or in the kingdom of heaven? And Christ, this was not the first time they asked him like this. This was not the first time they had discussion among them about this. So Christ brought a young kid in the midst of them, and he raised the kid and told him, if you don't accept the kingdom of heaven as a child, you will not enter. If you don't convert and accept the kingdom of heaven like a child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And I want to tell you how interesting that is. It was some sort of a competition. Who is the best? Who is the greatest? Right? That's the question. And it's interesting that today is Amba Bishoy departure, the commemoration of his departure. And Amba Bishoy, there was in the story that we read earlier now, that there was some sort of competition between the disciples to see the Christ, right? They all wanted to see Christ. So they were all rushing to the mountain to see Christ, because Saint Bishoy told them, he will see you at the mountain, right? And that kind of competition led them where exactly when they passed by that old man? We just read the story a minute ago. Sah? You remember the story, guys? Because this is directed to you, to those of you who look always for competition. The monks were running to see Christ by the mountain, and they saw an old man in the way to the mountain. And he asked them, can you please take me with you, so I want to see the Lord too? But they said, you're too old, you're going to make us late, we have to hurry up. This sort of competition, right? Nothing wrong with competition. However, we have to keep in mind that if competition is out of love, it's wrong. If we don't have kindness in our heart toward those who we compete against, then it becomes dangerous. We become very harsh. We become very intolerable people. I'll tell you another example, like those kids who fight to score A+ in the class. That's not a bad thing. It's a good competition. However, when they want to do every single thing, ignoring their friends and being, I don't know how to put it in words, but not even showing love or showing sympathy to other people who are struggling in the class and whatnot. This is sort of competition. Yes, they will score the A+, but they lost very important character. Very important character. Inside our life, purpose of it is to show love to one another. To show love to one another. And children, if you look at the children when they compete with one another, most likely, if one of them is hurt, yeah, they can run for a few seconds, but then they leave the ball, if they're playing with the ball or if they're running, and they go back to their friend who is hurt, and they check on him. Children do that. Why? because they know what's important. They know that their friend is more important than the competition itself. So when you go through your life, don't let competition take you so far, because it can turn you to someone who is not truly Christian, turn you to someone, just due to lack of a better word, to some sort of a monster who would do anything, destroy everyone just to get what he wants. This kind of competition is very dangerous. So today they ask Christ, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And I will tell you what Saint Jerome tells us about this. The disciples, seeing one piece of money paid both for Peter and the Lord, conceived from this quality of ransom that Peter was preferred before all the rest of the apostles. Was this the case? Was Peter preferred before all the rest of the apostles? No, this was not the case. This is how they wanted to see it. They felt jealous. Why would you pay money for him but not for us, right? Why pay taxes for him but not for me? I can't ask the Lord why. He can do whatever he wants. He is Lord. I can wait for him to answer, but he doesn't have to answer. This is the thing, right? I can't ask why. Why? Well, you cannot question the Lord like this. What you can ask for is just help me to understand. That's all. If I understand, that's great. If not, then that's up to you. And it's always helpful if you ask with the intention for your own spiritual growth, not for the intention on how to sort people or label people in your life. That's dangerous. Don't worry about people. In your relationship with Christ, it's a one-on-one relationship. People are agents to help you get closer to the Lord, not away from Him. A few weeks ago, we talked about true love and true Christian love, and what it does to us when we are put under high amount of pressure, how we should love to those who are really not lovable, that you cannot love. When the business is really stressful, and you have to still show love to those who are not easily loved. This is true Christian love. St. John Chrysostom says this: they were not even upset that Christ asked Peter. They were not upset that he asked Peter to go and catch the fish. James and John up on the mountain for the transfiguration. We already covered this part. But when one of them, which is Peter, was singled out, they began to question themselves. When one of them was assigned with a certain task, they started to question, is Peter better than us? Today, after the liturgy, we have a gather in the social hall for those who like to watch the final of the World Cup. We will watch the World Cup together. And any sports is about what? Competition, right? It's about what? Competition. So when you cheer for your team that you want him to win, remember this, that it's not just about competition. All right? It's not about competition. Everyone in that field today paid a lot of effort, a lot of work, put a lot of work to be in that field. So appreciate that. Don't just ignore it and disregard it because this is not the team that you're cheering for. Same thing with your friends who score B or B minus or even C. They're trying, but this is their best they can do. Don't disregard what they can achieve. That's the best they can do. When you belittle people, when you always look for first place, I tell you what, it's not a bad thing if your heart has love. It's a very, very selfish thing if you don't have love or sympathy toward others. Today, the disciples assumed that they're all going to go to heaven, right? Because they said, are we going to go to heaven or no? They asked, who will be the greatest in heaven, right? They were too confident that they're all going to go to heaven. Where did they get that from? However, Christ didn't answer their question. And here is the thing. When you feel so full of yourself and full of glory and full of pride, thank you, always look at the children. Children don't know the definition of pride. They don't know that. They don't know it. St. John Chrysostom says Adam was cast out of paradise because of his pride. Adam will never go back to heaven unless he cast out that pride and humble himself. All right? Kids, by nature, they're humble. They don't get offended easily. And if they get offended and they get mad and they yell and whatnot, then a little tap on the shoulder can bring them down, sometimes. So they don't hold grudges in their heart. If you're struggling with grudges, ask yourself, why? Is it your ego that's so hurting, that's why you cannot let go? Is it why you cannot let that go? Look at the children and how they act with one another in innocence and purity, and remind yourself always, this is a good lesson, even for the middle schoolers, because now we cannot call them children anymore, and the high schoolers, right? The children, they don't hold grudges. They're pure, they're innocent. Again, most of the time. But the point is, even if they plan something, they plan it and they don't have bad intention in their heart. Okay? So look at the children always and compare your actions to them. I'm not asking you to be a big child and act like children, everything. No, I'm asking that how you see evil. Look at the children and identify how they look at the evil. They don't understand the concept of evil. They're so innocent. They are pure, and when they see evil, they don't bother. They worry about their own time with their friends. Worry about your own time with God. If anything we learn about today is that we need to convert to the children to enter the kingdom of heaven. And kids do not see offenses. They don't see offenses. It's not easy for them to see offenses. If they see someone talking with a loud voice or someone who's always grumpy, they don't really analyze the situation and get to a conclusion about this grumpy person. No, he's grumpy. That's it, I don't have to analyze anything. Oh, he's loud. Oh, she's just nervous. She's nervous. Even if they can find if they know the word nervous, right? Or always being yelling and tension all the time. They don't know these things. They keep going. They deal with people with what in their heart, not how the people act towards them. Children are innocent, and based on this, they treat with one another with innocence, and they treat even with older people who might have or might be with wrong intentions. They treat them with innocence. I tell you this story, and we will end with it. In one of the churches, one of the servants came to the priest, and he was complaining about a certain servant. And Abuna listened. The priest listened. And that one servant kept complaining, and Abuna just kept listening until the other servant, that servant who's complaining, asked Abuna, Don't you see how this servant is acting? Are you blind? You don't see how he's acting? He's like, I don't know which actions you're talking about. I don't know what is it that you're referring to. Abuna was not blind to the actions of the servant. He just chose not to label them as bad things. He just wanted to treat everything with innocence and with purity. Of course, he had with that servant later, but at least for the time of complaining, he didn't kindle the fire. He tried to absorb the fire and calm that complaining servant. But his reaction was remarkable when he said, I don't know what actions you're talking about. I don't know what bad deeds that this servant is doing. I don't see them. I don't know what you're talking about. And sometimes this should be our response to people who come and complain and try to make us have bad grudges or bad attitude toward others. Just tell them, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. I don't see anything. I don't see that as a bad thing. Or even don't see that because he must like, are you blind? Just tell him, I'm not sure what you're talking about. All right? Try to deal with your kindness and your innocence with others. So when God sees this, He sees that you have a pure heart, He will give you the purity of the children. We thank God for everything, and we ask you today that you pray for one another. And remember this, what we read today in the Senexarium story, that when the Lord was talking to Amba Bishoy about the mountain full of monks, and he told him this mountain will be full of monks, and Sam Bishoy asked Christ, will you sustain them, O Lord? The Lord answered him and said, if they love one another, I will sustain them. If they love one another, I will sustain them. Same thing with us. When we love one another, God will always sustain them. To Him is glory forever and ever.